The rain came through the ceiling in 3 places that October morning in 1882, and Cade Brennan just moved his coffee cup 6 inches to the left and kept reading yesterday's newspaper like a man who had made peace with his own stubbornness. Sarah Mitchell watched him from the doorway of the ranch house kitchen, her carpetbag still in her hand, and wondered what kind of fool hired a housekeeper, then let his roof cave in around his ears. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice cutting through the steady plink, plink, plink of water hitting the wooden floor. "That roof is going to collapse come winter." He looked up then, and Sarah got her first real look at the man who had placed the advertisement in the Cheyenne newspaper. He was younger than she expected, maybe 30 at most, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was all hard angles and sun-weathered skin, the kind of handsome that came from working outdoors and not caring much about appearances. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a permanent look of skepticism. "It has held for 2 seasons," he said, his Wyoming drawl slow and measured. "It will hold a while longer. And what happens when the snow comes? You planning to sleep with an umbrella over your head?" Something flickered in those gray eyes. Amusement, maybe, or irritation. With men like him, it was hard to tell the difference. "Are you always this forward with your employers, Miss Mitchell? Only when they are being idiots about basic home maintenance." He stood then, unfolding from the chair with the easy grace of a man who spent more time in the saddle than in a house. He was tall, well over 6 feet, and broad through the shoulders in the way of men who hauled fence posts and wrestled cattle for a living. The job was for cooking and cleaning. "I do not recall mentioning roof repair in my advertisement." Sarah set her carpetbag down with a decisive thump. "Then you should have been more specific. I grew up on a ranch in Colorado. My father had 3 daughters and no sons, so we learned to do everything. I can patch a roof as well as any man, probably better than most. That includes you, apparently, since you have been ignoring the problem long enough for the damage to spread." For a long moment, Cade Brennan just stared at her. Then, to her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Not quite a smile, but close enough to count. "You are hired, Miss Mitchell, but the roof is my concern, not yours. Your concern has created 3 leaks and counting. Where do you keep your ladder and tar paper, Miss Mitchell?" It is Sarah. "And I am going to fix your roof, Mr. Brennan, whether you like it or not. You can either tell me where the supplies are, or I can waste half a morning searching for them myself." He exhaled through his nose, a sound caught between exasperation and something that might have been respect. "The barn, west side, tools are in the tack room." He paused, his eyes holding hers. "And it is Cade. If you are going to be stubborn about this, we might as well be on a first-name basis." Sarah allowed herself a small smile of victory. "Fine, Cade. Now sit down and finish your coffee before it gets cold. I will start breakfast once I have assessed the damage." She did not wait for his response, just turned on her heel and headed out into the gray morning. The ranch spread out before her in shades of gold and brown, autumn grass rippling under a wind that smelled of rain and distant snow. The barn was well maintained, she noticed, and the fences were straight and strong. It was just the house that suffered from neglect, which told her something about Cade Brennan. He took care of his land and his animals. It was himself he could not be bothered with. The ladder was where he said it would be, along with tar paper, nails, and a hammer that had seen better days. Sarah hauled everything to the house, ignoring the way the wind whipped her skirts around her legs and pulled strands of blonde hair loose from her careful bun. She had worn her work dress today, the sturdy brown cotton that could handle stains and rough treatment, and her oldest boots. Good thing, too, because by the time she climbed onto the roof, the rain had started up again, turning everything slick and treacherous. The damage was worse than it looked from inside. The shingles were old and brittle, and several sections had rotted through completely. This was not a quick patch job. This was going to take days, maybe a week if she worked alone. Sarah sat back on her heels, surveying the wreckage, and wondered what had happened to make a man let his home fall apart around him. You should come down before you break your neck." She looked down to find Cade standing below, his hat pulled low against the rain. "I have been on roofs since I was 10 years old. I am not going to fall. The shingles are rotten, they will not hold your weight. Then I will be careful where I step. This needs to be fixed before the real weather hits, Cade. Another month and it will be too cold to work up here." He was quiet for a moment, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "Why do you care? You just got here." It was a fair question, and Sarah considered her answer carefully. The truth was complicated, tied up in her own history and the reasons she had left Colorado in the first place. But there was a simpler truth, too, one that she could offer without exposing too much of herself. Because a house should be a home, not just a place to sleep between working. And because I have nowhere else to go, so I might as well make sure I have a dry roof over my head. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the edges. "Come down, we will work on it together after breakfast. You have cattle to tend." "The cattle can wait an hour. Come on, Sarah." "You are getting soaked." The way he said her name, rough and careful all at once, did something strange to her chest. She ignored it, focusing instead on the practical matter of climbing down a wet ladder without slipping. Cade steadied the base, then offered his hand for the last few feet. His palm was calloused and warm against hers, and he did not let go immediately when her feet touched the ground. "Thank you," she said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. He nodded, his eyes searching her face like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Then he stepped back, breaking the moment. "Let me show you around properly, then we can eat and tackle that roof." The house was bigger than it looked from the outside, built solid with good bones beneath the neglect. There were 4 rooms downstairs, a kitchen, a sitting room, a study, and a small bedroom that Cade said was hers. Upstairs were 2 more bedrooms, one clearly his and one that looked like it had not been opened in years. Dust covered every surface up there and the air smelled stale and sad. "Who lived here before?" Sarah asked, running her finger along the windowsill and leaving a track in the dust. Cade's jaw tightened. "My parents. They built this place 30 years ago, ran cattle and horses. My father died 5 years back. My mother followed him 6 months later. Doctors said it was pneumonia, but I think it was a broken heart." He paused in the doorway, not quite looking at her. "I have been on my own since then. No siblings, a sister. Rebecca. She married a banker in Denver and moved east. We write sometimes, but she has her own life now." Sarah heard what he was not saying, the loneliness beneath the words. "And you have been letting the house fall apart because it reminds you of them." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the grief still raw in his eyes. Something like that. She wanted to reach for him, to offer comfort, but they were still strangers, really, for all that she was standing in his house and planning to fix his roof. Instead, she said, "Then we will make it a home again. Not the same as it was, but something new, something yours." "Ours," he said quietly. "If you are staying, it is yours too." The word hung between them, full of possibility and promise, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight bands she had wrapped around her heart when she left Colorado. She had not been looking for anything when she answered Cade Brennan's advertisement, just a job and a place to stay. But standing here in this dusty room with this grieving man, she thought maybe she had found something more. They spent the rest of the morning working on the roof, side by side in the drizzle. Cade was competent with his hands, methodical and careful, but she could tell he had been avoiding this work deliberately. Every time he pulled up a rotten shingle, his mouth tightened like he was removing a piece of the past. "Tell me about them," Sarah said as she hammered down a new section of tar paper. "Your parents." He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then, slowly, the words came. "My father was tough, the kind of man who could wrestle a steer to the ground and then quote Shakespeare over dinner. My mother was gentle but strong, you know. She ran this house like a general, kept everything organized and running smooth. They loved each other something fierce. 40 years married and they still held hands at the dinner table." Sarah smiled despite the ache in her throat. "That is beautiful." "It is. It was." He sat back, hammer resting on his knee. After they died, I just focused on the ranch. Easier to work myself into exhaustion than to sit in that house and feel them missing. The roof started leaking last spring, and I kept meaning to fix it. But every time I climbed up here, I would remember my father teaching me how to lay shingles when I was 12. So I would climb back down and find something else to do. Grief is like that, Sarah said softly. It ambushes you in the strangest places. You sound like you know from experience. She did. God, she did. My mother died when I was 16, childbirth. The baby, too, my father never recovered. He sold the ranch 3 years ago and moved in with my older sister in Denver. My other sister got married and went to Oregon. I stayed in Colorado, worked as a housekeeper for a family in Colorado Springs, but the husband got too familiar with his hands, if you understand my meaning. So I left, and here I am. Cade's expression darkened. Did he hurt you? He tried. I broke his nose with a cast-iron skillet and left that night. His wife believed him when he said I seduced him because that is what wives do, believe their husbands. The bitterness in her voice surprised her. She had thought she was past that anger, but apparently it still lived just beneath her skin. You should have shot him, she laughed, startled. That seems excessive. Not from where I am sitting. Man puts his hands on a woman without permission, he deserves what he gets. Cade's eyes were fierce, protective, and something warm unfurled in Sarah's stomach. Well, the skillet worked well enough, and it led me here, so maybe it worked out the way it was supposed to. Maybe, he said, and the way he was looking at her made her heart do something complicated in her chest. They worked through lunch, stopping only when Sarah's stomach growled loud enough to echo across the roof. Cade laughed, the first real laugh she had heard from him, and the sound was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Come on, let me see if you can cook as well as you can patch a roof. Challenge accepted. She made stew from the supplies in the pantry, thick with beef and potatoes and carrots and biscuits that came out golden and perfect. Cade ate 3 helpings, barely speaking, and when he finally pushed his plate away, he looked at her with something like wonder. I have been living on beans and stale bread for 6 months, he said. This is the best meal I have had in years. Then you have been living wrong, Cade Brennan. I am starting to realize that. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Sarah would wake before dawn, start the fire, put coffee on, and begin breakfast. Cade would come in from checking the cattle, eat quickly, and then they would work on the roof together until the afternoon. Then he would ride out to tend the herd while Sarah cleaned the house, room by room, chasing out the dust and the ghosts. She washed curtains and scrubbed floors, polished windows until they sparkled, and slowly the house began to breathe again. Evenings, they ate dinner together and talked. Cade told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd next spring, about the neighbors and the town of Casper, 20 miles south. Sarah told him about Colorado, about growing up on her father's ranch, about the books she loved to read and the places she wanted to see someday. They were careful with each other, polite, but beneath the surface, Sarah felt the pull growing stronger. The way Cade's eyes followed her when she moved around the kitchen, the way her breath caught when their hands brushed passing tools on the roof. The way the silence between them felt charged, full of things neither was ready to say. A week after she arrived, they finished the roof. The last shingle went down just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Cade straightened, surveying their work, and nodded with satisfaction. It is good, better than it was before. We make a good team, Sarah said, and meant it as more than just a comment about carpentry. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the want in his eyes, raw and undisguised. Sarah? Yes. But whatever he was going to say was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching fast. Cade's expression shifted instantly, going hard and wary. Get inside. Now. What is wrong? Just go, please. The urgency in his voice sent Sarah scrambling down the ladder. She made it to the porch just as 3 riders came around the barn, moving at a canter that kicked up dust and spoke of bad intentions. Cade climbed down after her, moving to stand between Sarah and the newcomers, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. The lead rider was a big man, thick through the chest and mean around the eyes. He pulled his horse to a stop 10 feet from the porch and grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Well, Brennan, heard you got yourself a woman, figured I would come see for myself." "Ride on, Hutchins." "You have got no business here." "Maybe I am just being neighborly, introducing myself to the new lady." Hutchins's eyes slid to Sarah, and she felt the weight of his gaze like something greasy on her skin. Cade's voice went cold. "I said ride on, or what? You going to shoot me in front of your pretty housekeeper? That would not be very gentlemanly of you, Brennan." The two men flanking Hutchins laughed, and Sarah realized with a sick twist in her stomach that they were drunk. Not stumbling drunk, but mean drunk, the kind that made men reckless and dangerous. "Cade," she said quietly, "let me go inside." "Stay where you are," he said, not taking his eyes off Hutchins. "These men are leaving." "Maybe the lady wants to make her own choices," Hutchins said. "What do you say, sweetheart? Want to come work for a real man? I pay better than Brennan here, and I can promise you better accommodations. My bed is a lot warmer than a drafty old ranch house." Sarah felt anger flash hot and bright through her fear. "I would rather sleep in a barn than anywhere near you. Now get off this property before I get my rifle." Hutchins's grin turned ugly. "Feisty, I like that in a woman." Cade moved then, stepping fully in front of Sarah, his whole body coiled and ready. "Last chance, Hutchins. Ride away now, or I will drop you where you sit." For a long moment, the air was thick with tension. Then Hutchins spat in the dirt and jerked his horse's head around. "This is not over, Brennan. You owe me for that water rights dispute, and I aim to collect." The judge ruled in my favor. "You have got no claim to the creek. We will see about that." Hutchins kicked his horse into a trot, and his two companions followed, all three of them disappearing into the gathering dusk. Cade did not move until they were out of sight. Then he exhaled slowly and turned to Sarah. "Are you all right?" "I am fine. Who was that?" "Vernon Hutchins. He owns the ranch to the east. We have been fighting over water rights for 2 years. I won the last court case, but he is not the type to let things go." Cade's jaw was tight with anger. "I am sorry he spoke to you that way. If he comes back, I will kill him." The flat certainty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, Sarah felt something fierce and possessive bloom in her chest. "I can handle men like Hutchins. I have dealt with worse." "I know you can, but you should not have to." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her, but was not sure he had the right. "Sarah, if you want to leave, I will understand. I will pay you for the work you have done and give you enough for a train ticket anywhere you want to go. I will not hold you to our agreement if you do not feel safe here." She caught his hand, lacing her fingers through his, and felt him go still. "I am not going anywhere, Cade. That man does not scare me, and I meant what I said about making this place a home. I am staying." His eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for hesitation. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly, his hand tightening around hers. "All right, but promise me you will not go out alone until this settles." Hutchins is not above ambushing someone if he thinks he can get away with it. "I promise. Now come inside. I will make coffee, and you can tell me the whole story about this water rights fight." They sat at the kitchen table for hours that night, talking by lamplight. Cade explained how the creek that ran through his property originated in the mountains and passed through Hutchins's land before reaching his. 2 years ago, Hutchins had tried to dam it up, claiming sole ownership, which would have cut off Cade's water supply completely. The legal battle had been long and expensive, but Cade had finally won based on territorial water laws that protected downstream users. Hutchins had been forced to remove the dam, but he had been making threats ever since. "He wants me to sell," Cade said, staring into his coffee cup. "Offered me a fair price last spring. When I refused, he started making trouble. Cut my fences, spooked my cattle, tried to turn the other ranchers against me. Most folks around here know what he is, though, so it has not worked." "Why does he want your land so badly?" "The creek. If he owns both properties, he controls the water for the entire valley. He could charge every rancher around here for access, make a fortune. It is not about the land itself, it is about power and money. Sarah leaned back in her chair, thinking, he is not going to give up, is he? No. Men like Hutchins never do. Then we will just have to be smarter than him. Cade looked up at her and the corner of his mouth lifted. We, Sarah confirmed. You are stuck with me now, remember, for better or worse. The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah realized too late how they sounded. Like a marriage vow, like a promise. Cade's eyes darkened, and the air seemed to thicken with something electric and inevitable. Sarah, he said, his voice rough, I need to tell you something. Her heart was beating too fast. What? I have not been honest with you. Well, not dishonest, but not completely truthful either. He stood, pacing to the window and back, agitated. When I placed that advertisement for a housekeeper, I was not looking for just help around the house. I mean, I was, but I also wanted someone here, someone to talk to, someone to make the place feel less empty. I have been lonely, Sarah, lonelier than I knew how to admit even to myself. She stood too, moving toward him slowly. I know, I could tell the first day I got here. Could you also tell that the moment you climbed on that roof and started bossing me around, I started falling for you? Her breath caught. Cade. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but there is something about you, Sarah Mitchell. The way you see what needs doing and just do it. The way you are not afraid of hard work or speaking your mind. The way you made me care about this house again, about fixing what was broken. You did that. You came in here and started putting things back together, starting with that damned roof I was too stubborn and sad to repair. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him. I need you here, not as a housekeeper, as a partner. As my wife, if you will have me. Sarah's mind was reeling. 2 weeks. She had been here 2 weeks and this man was proposing marriage. It was insane. It was impulsive. It was everything she had told herself she did not want after leaving Colorado. But when she looked into Cade's storm-gray eyes and saw the hope and fear and longing there, she realized something terrifying and wonderful. She was falling for him too. Maybe it had been since that first morning when he moved his coffee cup instead of fixing the leak, when she saw beneath his stubbornness to the grief and loneliness underneath. That is a lot to take in, she said carefully. His face fell. I know, I am sorry. I should not have said anything. It is too soon, you barely know me, and I just dumped all of this on you like a fool. Forget I said anything. We can just keep on the way we have been. Cade, stop talking and let me finish. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands, feeling the scrape of his evening stubble against her palms. I am not saying no, I am just saying it is fast. But you know what? I do not care. I do not care that it has been 2 weeks or that everyone would say we are crazy. I have been practical my whole life, done what was expected, played it safe, and where did it get me? A broken nose and a one-way ticket out of Colorado, so maybe it is time I stopped being practical and started listening to what my heart is saying. And what is your heart saying? His voice was barely a whisper. That I want to stay, that I want to build a life here with you. That when I think about the future, I see myself on this ranch in this house that we fixed together. I see mornings working side by side and evenings talking by the fire. I see us making this place ours. She smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. So yes, Cade Brennan, yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, gentle at first, almost hesitant, like he was afraid she might break. But Sarah had never been fragile, and she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing and loneliness of the past 3 years, all the hope she had been too scared to let herself feel. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and for the first time since her mother died, Sarah felt like she was home. They were married 3 weeks later in Casper, with the local preacher officiating and 2 strangers pulled in off the street to serve as witnesses. Sarah wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself, and Cade wore his best suit, the one that had belonged to his father. It was not fancy, but it was theirs, and when Cade slipped a gold band on her finger and promised to love her until death, Sarah believed him with her whole heart. The trouble with Hutchins came to a head 2 months into their marriage. It was late December, the first real snowstorm of the season blowing in from the north, when Cade rode out to check the cattle and did not come back. Sarah waited an hour, then two, worry gnawing at her stomach. Finally, she saddled her own horse, a sweet-tempered mare named Daisy that Cade had given her as a wedding present, and rode out into the storm. She found him near the creek, his horse standing ground-tied nearby. He was on foot, examining something in the snow, and when she got closer, she saw what it was. Someone had cut the fence again, and this time they had driven off at least 20 head of cattle, the tracks disappearing into the blowing snow. "Hutchins," Cade said, his voice cold with fury. "Has to be. This is the third time this month. We need to report this to the sheriff, and tell him what? That I have suspicions but no proof. Hutchins is too smart to get caught red-handed." Cade stood, his jaw tight. "I am going to ride over there and confront him. The hell you are." "Not alone and not in this storm." Sarah grabbed his arm, holding tight. "Cade, that is exactly what he wants. You ride onto his property angry and accusing, he shoots you and claims self-defense. Please, come home, we will figure this out together." He looked at her, the anger in his eyes warring with reason. Finally, he nodded. "You are right, but we have to do something, Sarah. I cannot keep losing cattle like this. It will ruin us by spring. Then we will set a trap, catch him in the act and have witnesses, but not today and not alone." They rode back together through the storm, and that night, Sarah lay awake planning. The next morning, she rode into Casper and spoke to the sheriff, an older man named Tom Garrett who had known Cade's father. She explained the situation, the missing cattle, the cut fences, the pattern that pointed directly at Hutchins. Garrett listened, his expression grave, and then nodded. "I have had my eye on Hutchins for a while now," he said, "but like Cade said, I need proof." "You are right about setting a trap, though. If we can catch him in the act, I can arrest him and make it stick." He leaned back in his chair, thinking. "Tell Cade to spread the word he is moving his herd to the winter pasture next week. Make sure Hutchins hears about it. If he takes the bait, we will be waiting." Sarah rode home with hope flickering cautiously in her chest. That night, she and Cade made the plan, and over the next few days, Cade let slip in town that he would be moving the cattle on Saturday. As predicted, word got back to Hutchins, and on Friday night, Sarah and Cade took up position in the barn overlooking the main pasture. Sheriff Garrett and 2 deputies were hidden in the trees near the creek. All they could do now was wait. The moon was high and bright when the riders came, 4 of them this time, including Hutchins. They cut the fence quickly and started driving the cattle toward the property line. Cade tensed beside Sarah, ready to move, but she put a hand on his arm, holding him back. They needed to wait until the cattle were clearly being stolen, until there was no way Hutchins could talk his way out of it. The sheriff must have been thinking the same thing because he did not move until Hutchins and his men had driven the cattle a quarter-mile onto Hutchins's property. Then Garrett and his deputies rode out of the trees, guns drawn, and shouted for them to stop. What happened next was chaos. 2 of Hutchins's men surrendered immediately, throwing their hands up. The 3rd tried to run and was tackled off his horse by one of the deputies. Hutchins, though, went for his gun. Cade was moving before Sarah could stop him, running out of the barn toward the confrontation. She followed, her heart in her throat, arriving just in time to hear the sheriff shout, "Drop it, Hutchins, or I will drop you." Hutchins looked around, trapped and cornered, and for a moment Sarah thought he might actually try to shoot his way out. Then his shoulders slumped and he let the gun fall to the ground. "This is not over, Brennan," he snarled as the sheriff cuffed him. "I will get out, and when I do, I am coming for you. You will be in prison for cattle rustling," Garrett said calmly. "That is 10 years minimum, and that is if the judge is feeling generous. By the time you get out, Brennan will have built this ranch into something you cannot touch." They hauled Hutchins and his men away, and Sarah and Cade stood in the moonlight watching them go. When the dust settled and they were alone again, Cade turned to her, pulling her into his arms. "You did that," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You figured out how to stop him." "We did it together." That seems to be our pattern, doesn't it? He laughed, the sound bright and free in the cold air. I guess it is. Lord, Sarah, I love you. I do not say it enough, but I do. You came into my life and fixed everything I did not even know was broken. Starting with the roof, she said, smiling up at him. Starting with the roof, he agreed and kissed her under the Wyoming stars. Winter passed into spring and spring into summer. The ranch prospered, the cattle multiplied, and slowly, Cade and Sarah built the life they had dreamed of. They added onto the house, creating space for the family they hoped to have. They hired 2 ranch hands, young men who worked hard and treated Sarah with respect. They became part of the community, attending church socials and barn dances, making friends with the other ranchers and their families. And in September, nearly a year after Sarah first arrived, she told Cade she was pregnant. He picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, laughing like a boy, and that night they lay in bed talking about names and nurseries and all the ways their lives were about to change. Their son was born the following May, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of the bedroom. He came into the world howling, red-faced and furious, and when the midwife placed him in Sarah's arms, she looked down at his tiny, perfect face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Cade sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, staring at their son with wonder and terror in equal measure. "What should we name him?" he asked softly. Sarah thought for a moment, then smiled. "James, after your father." Cade's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. Your father built this place, made it what it is. It seems right that his grandson should carry his name forward." They called him Jamie, and he was a happy baby, quick to smile and easy to soothe. Sarah had worried about balancing the work of the ranch with motherhood, but Cade was a hands-on father, changing diapers and walking the floor with Jamie at night when he was fussy. They worked as a team, the way they always had, and the house that had once been so quiet and sad rang with laughter and baby noises. When Jamie was 6 months old, Cade's sister Rebecca came to visit, traveling from Boston with her husband and 2 daughters. She cried when she saw the house, how it had been restored and filled with life again. "You did this," she said to Sarah over tea while the men were outside and the children napped. "You brought my brother back. After Mama and Papa died, I thought I had lost him too. He just shut down, stopped living, but look at him now. He is happy again." Sarah glanced out the window to where Cade stood with Rebecca's husband, the 2 of them examining a new fence line. "He did the work himself. I just gave him a reason." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "You gave him more than that. You gave him hope. You fixed the things he could not fix himself, starting with that roof." She smiled. "He wrote me, you know, about a month after you arrived. Said he had hired a housekeeper who climbed on the roof in the rain and refused to come down until she had patched the leaks. He said she was the stubbornest woman he had ever met and he thought he might be in love with her." Sarah's eyes widened. "He did not." "He did. And then 2 months later, I got a telegram saying he was getting married, and I needed to not be scandalized because he knew it was fast, but he knew his own mind. I was worried, I will admit. I thought maybe he was just lonely and making a mistake. But seeing you 2 together, seeing this place, I know he made exactly the right choice." "So did I," Sarah said softly. The years rolled by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch grew, and so did their family. 2 years after Jamie, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Lucy, who had her father's gray eyes and her mother's determination. Then another son, Thomas, who was quiet and thoughtful, and finally another daughter, Emma, who came screaming into the world during a blizzard and never quite lost that fierce energy. Cade proved to be everything Sarah had hoped for and more. He was patient with the children, firm but kind, teaching them to ride and rope and care for the land. He was a devoted husband, still looking at Sarah like she was a miracle even after a decade of marriage. And he was a good neighbor, helping others when they needed it, serving on the town council, working to build schools and churches and all the things that turned a rough collection of ranches into a real community. Sarah, for her part, threw herself into the life she had chosen. She managed the house and helped with the ranch, keeping the books and organizing the spring roundups. She taught her children to read and write, to be kind and fair and brave. She planted a garden every spring and put up preserves every fall. She sewed clothes and nursed sick calves and fixed things when they broke, because that was who she was. The woman who saw what needed doing and did it. And every year, when the weather turned cold and the first snow began to fall, Cade would look up at the roof, solid and strong, and remember the day Sarah Mitchell climbed up there in the rain and changed his life forever. 20 years after that day, they stood on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Their children were grown now, Jamie running the ranch with Cade, Lucy married to a rancher in Montana, Thomas studying law in Cheyenne, and Emma away at a women's college in Colorado. The house was quieter now, but still full of life, still full of love. Do you ever regret it? Cade asked, his arm around Sarah's waist. Answering my advertisement, coming out here, marrying a stubborn cowboy who could not be bothered to fix his own roof. Sarah leaned into him, smiling. Not for 1 second, best decision I ever made, even though I was an idiot about the roof. Especially because you were an idiot about the roof. If you had fixed it yourself, I never would have had an excuse to prove how useful I was. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with laughter and love. Besides, I was not coming here just to cook and clean. I was coming here to build a life, even if I did not know it at the time, and I found one with you. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, the way he had kissed her 1,000 times before and would kiss her 1,000 times more. When they pulled apart, Cade rested his forehead against hers, his voice low and content. You fixed more than the roof, Sarah. You fixed me. You fixed us. You fixed this whole place, made it something worth fighting for again. We fixed it together, she corrected gently. That is what we do. That is what we have always done. Above them, the roof stood strong and solid, proof that sometimes the things we ignore for too long are exactly the things that bring us the help we need. Sarah had climbed up there 20 years ago, a stranger with a carpetbag and a determination to make herself useful, and in fixing Cade's roof, she had built a home. Their home. A place where grief had been transformed into joy, where loneliness had been replaced with love, and where two broken people had found each other and become whole. The Wyoming wind picked up, carrying the scent of grass and cattle and the promise of snow. Cade pulled Sarah closer, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This was home. This was family. This was everything she had been searching for without knowing it, all those years ago when she climbed onto a leaky roof in the rain and refused to come down. Come on, Cade said finally, taking her hand. Let's go inside. I will make dinner while you read through Emma's latest letter. She said something about bringing home a young man for Christmas, and I want to know everything before he sets foot on this ranch. Sarah laughed, letting him pull her toward the door. You are going to scare the poor boy. That is the plan. He needs to know what he is getting into, marrying into this family. Like you knew what you were getting into when you hired me. Absolutely not. If I had known you were going to come in here and turn my whole life upside down, I might have run for the hills. He paused, his hand on the doorknob, and looked at her with all the love and tenderness of 2 decades together. And then I would have missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me. So I guess it is a good thing I was too stubborn to fix that roof when I should have, because it brought me you. They went inside together, closing the door on the gathering dark, and the house welcomed them with warmth and light. The roof overhead was solid, the walls were strong, and the hearts within were full. It had all started with a leak and a ladder, and a woman who refused to let a man drown in his own grief. And in the end, Sarah had not just fixed the roof. She had fixed everything that mattered, building a life and a love that would last for all the years to come, enduring as the land itself, strong as the mountains and true as the Wyoming sky.